Good afternoon, ma'am. Swarna, ma'am. இப்போ இந்த பிரசன்ட்ல வந்து என்டையர் ஸ்கிரீன் கொடுத்துருக்கோம்ல, அதுக்கு பதிலா ஒரு பகுதி மட்டும் கொடுக்க முடியுமா?
ஒரே நிமிஷம் மேம், ஏதோ பிரசன்ட்ல கேட்குறேன்.
ஒரு விண்டோ கொடுத்தோம்னா சரி வேண்டாம், எதுக்கு ரிஸ்க்? ஒரு தடவை பார்த்துட்டு அப்புறம் ஸ்கிரீன் கொடுத்துக்கலாம்.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Shall we begin the program, ma'am?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I was late by 5 minutes. I had some network problem, dear.
No issues, ma'am. Let's begin.
Prayer song. You can start the program now.
Prayer song. Now, I call upon S. Deekshana from 2nd BCom B to sing the prayer song.
சின்னஞ்சிறு பெண் போலே சிற்றாடை இடையுடுத்தி சிவகங்கை குலத்தருகே ஸ்ரீ துர்கை சிரித்திருப்பாள். சின்னஞ்சிறு பெண் போலே பெண்ணவளின் கண்ணழகை பேசி முடியாது. பெண்ணவளின் கண்ணழகை பேசி முடியாது. பித்தனுக்கு இணையாக நர்த்தனம் கிடையாது. பித்தனுக்கு இணையாக நர்த்தனம் கிடையாது. மின்னலை போல் மேனி அன்னை சிவகாமி சின்னஞ்சிறு பெண் போலே சிற்றாடை இடையுடுத்தி சிவகங்கை குலத்தருகே ஸ்ரீ துர்கை சிரித்திருப்பாள்.
I deem it a great pleasure to invite Dr. S. Saraswati ma'am, Head, Department of Commerce, to welcome the gathering.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. I deem it a great pleasure to welcome one and all present here. I extend a warm welcome to our Chief Guest, Dr. N. Rajeshwari, Principal, GVG Visalakshi College for Women, Udumalpet. I also extend my warm welcome to faculty members of Menti Institution and our institution. Now I introduce the Chief Guest. It is my proud privilege to introduce our Chief Guest, Dr. N. Rajeshwari, Principal, Sri GVG Visalakshi College for Women, Udumalpet. She has produced 12 MPhil candidates. She has presented papers at various national and international level. She has completed UGC-funded minor projects from 2015 to 2017. She has also published articles in 9 international journals. She has been a reviewer in International Journal of Applied and Computational Mathematics, Scopus Indexed Journal. She has a global exposure of presenting paper in abroad. She has selected to attend a 2-week workshop on nonlinear evolution, integrability, and spectral methods at Les Houses, France, in the year 1988. Her paper has been selected at Greece for the year 1989. She has also been presented a paper in international conference in mathematics and statistics at American University of Sharjah, UAE in the year 2015. She has acted as a member in various committees like College Committee, Academic Council, Board of Studies, Staff Selection Panel, and Accreditation Ambassador in UCG Paramas Scheme. She has also acted as a coordinator in IQAC and ERP, and also convener in ICT Cell, ED Cell, Faculty Development Cell, and Inspection Committee for various colleges. She has won the Best Performer Award for the year 2014, 15, and 2018. Such a wonderful and dedicated personality amid us to address the gathering. Thank you, ma'am.
Dear participants, kindly fill the registration form in the beginning of the session and fill the feedback form at the end of the session. The link is posted. Dear participants, kindly fill the registration form in the beginning of the session and fill the feedback form at the end of the session. The link is posted in the chat box.
To deliver their speech.
Excuse me.
Hello, ma'am.
Shall we start?
Yes, ma'am.
Shall we start the meeting, madam?
Yes, madam, you can start the meeting, madam. Raji, madam, you can start.
Yeah. Okay, I was just waiting. I thought you had some formalities and I was just waiting. Okay, ma'am, we start.
The program.
Okay, very good afternoon to everyone. I'm really delighted to present myself. Of course, I am the academic ambassador for our institution. So I am more responsible to carry over this session in the most purposeful manner. So I take a great pride and happiness in welcoming all the Menti institutions, so much like our Menti institutions. We are closely knit with our Menti institutions, and we are also conducting quite many programs for our Menti institutions. And so I hope we are just towards the end of this Paramarsh program in mentoring the institutions who are just taking the first step into the assessment and accreditation process for NAAC. So I wish all the Menti institutions all the very best to prepare their IIQA, submit it, get it approved, and then of course later on continue to prepare your SSR with confidence. And I know Vellalar College for Women, they have been doing excellently well, and definitely they would have given you all that is required to submit your IIQA and your SSR. And definitely you would have been working closely with the IQAC cell of IQAC or Paramarsh team so that you could submit your SSR with confidence. So all my best wishes to all the faculty who have joined this program from the Menti institutions. So with that, I would like to just brief upon the quality and excellence through academic audit. The reason for my choosing this topic was actually, since we are at the end of the academia Paramarsh program, I think the audit has to be done in every mentee institution, an academic and of course administrative audit. I'm just touching only upon the academic audit. So I thought this could be right for this situation, and that's why we have this quality and excellence. So it's almost the end of the process that we have been doing all through these years. And we would have, all the mentee institutions would have prepared your documents for submission, and you should be ready for academic audit. So we'll just have a brief look at why we need this academic audit. There is an old adage that goes like, communities don't work well unless regulated by etiquette. So we need some etiquette to present ourselves being teaching professionals in the field of education. So this regulations and the etiquettes that we are going to follow will definitely take us to the best quality in our profession. And well, according to this statement, in any kind of educational setup, there should be well set up rules and regulations of how things should be or must be done to ensure efficiency. Without the rules and regulations, there could be a mess up of all the activities that have been done. So we need some regulatory measure, and academic audit is one such regulatory measure to look into whether the rules and regulations have been followed or not. Now let us see what's the current scenario in higher education. Increasingly prevalent trend in higher education scenario in India in the recent years is the willingness and the drive by institutions and universities to introduce systems and practices in the work environment, and also establish high standards and benchmarks to guide performance. And these days, more and more colleges and universities in the country volunteer to subject their activities and performances to be critically reviewed and audited by various national and international agencies. And in this context, the NAAC Accreditation Assessment and Accreditation Council has been doing a very good job, and it has been assessing colleges and universities across the nation to accredit the institutions with the grade based on their creditability of the documents that they have been submitting through SSR. And of course, NBA is another accreditation agencies, and of course engineering institutions go for NBA. And the contributions actually made by these national bodies is really immense in the quality improvement of the institutions across India. Now let us come to this academic audit. Academic audit is the plays a pivotal role in NAAC assessment and accreditation of any educational institution. To tell something briefly about it, it's actually a tool to control and maintain standards in the academic sector. In fact, academic audit, what we really think now is just the end of year audit of the activities that we have done. But it's not actually so. It is actually a continuous process right from the beginning of the academic year till the end of the academic year, and of course carrying on to the next years. So it's considered as a tool, and using that we control and maintain the standards of the evaluation. Now, it is also related with the quality assurance and enhancing the quality of all the academic activities in the higher education institution. The main objective of academic audit is to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the departments and of course the institution at large for the continuous improvement of quality in the higher education institution. The process of academic auditing intends to monitor and enhance the quality of education through proper guidelines, for both the teaching faculty and the students, and of course the office also, the administrative office also, so as to ensure qualified students or researchers pass out from the portals of the higher education institution. And in this context, the creation of internal quality assurance mechanisms that help to inculcate the gains made from such efforts in the day-to-day work ethics and organizational culture of an institution is definitely an indispensable requirement in any quality assurance system. So now just let us have a brief view of the objectives of an academic audit. An academic audit is conducted in the institution to ensure accountability. Yes, we have to be accountable for all the activities that we have been carrying out within the institution throughout the year. So, and that accountability is reflected in the grade given to any higher educational institution. And now, the next primary objective is to define the quality of each component of the functionalities. To be more simple, we need to look into the quality aspect for each activity that we perform within the institution, whatever be the activity, whether it is a discipline within the institution, whether it is the teaching, learning part of the institution, and whether it is the conduct of workshop, conduct of seminars, conduct of any component part of assessment, all those things, whatever activity be in the institution, we have to define this objective of the academic audit is to define the quality in each component of the activity. And of course, it is to ensure the quality of education throughout the system. Throughout the system, each and every activity that takes place within the institution. And of course, apart from this, it has to safeguard all the functionalities of the or the primary objectives of education also. It has to look at focus into the primary functionalities of education. And it is used, this academic audit helps to define the effectiveness of the teaching learning process, which forms the heart and soul of the higher educational institution. And of course, to devise a methodology to confirm maximum output from the faculty members and also from the students, that will definitely define the quality. Whenever there is a maximum output from faculty and students, with defining quality in each and every one of the activities, we could definitely see the maximum output through the academic audit. Now, as you all know, we can classify this academic audit as two types: internal academic audit and external academic audit. Internal academic audit is generally an in-house operation, and it is carried out for self-introspection. And this audit definitely can be of different ways, and it can be defined by the institution, and it is more specific to the institution. The methodologies are spelled by the vision and mission of the institution. Based on the vision and mission of the institution, the activities of the internal audit takes place. And in fact, it is done for a self-introspection to see how we have been performing. We get the feedback. We especially at during periodically we get feedback from our stakeholders like students, parents, faculty themselves, then of course the other subject experts who are associated with our institution, then from the industrial experts wherein our children are placed, and we can get a very good feedback from them. And based on the feedback, we make some self-introspection and we see what are the quality gaps, and we try to fill in the quality gaps. The next type of audit is the external audit. Now, when we are unable to see certain gaps within the on self-introspection, if we could not identify our gaps, definitely the external audit will help us to open up our eyes to see where we have been lacking, and it is more reliable and it is conducted for a wider recognition. And that exactly is the external audit done by NAAC. And the assessment accreditation done by NAAC is an external audit, and the audit performed by the IQAC cell of each college is can be termed as the internal audit. And also there are in many of the institutions, internal audit is conducted at a department level. In certain cases, the faculty themselves carry out an audit with the students to see that to have a self-introspection of what they have been doing in the teaching learning process. So internal audit could be of in many levels, and external audit, of course, it depends upon the policies of the institutions. And currently under the Paramarsh scheme, we talk about only NAAC. We could have also some other external audits, like if your institution is have a tie-up or MOU with the ISO, you could the ISO audit also serves as an external audit to see that we have all the process within the institution goes about perfectly. Now coming to the external, we are focusing right now on the external audit, and what are the functionalities behind the external audit. Now let us see what is the role of NAAC in this academic audit. NAAC has actually developed a systematic process of external academic audit for institutes of higher education in India. Actually, the main purpose of NAAC introducing this process of accreditation is to make our system a globally recognized educational system. That is, all those graduating from the higher education institutions of India should be globally employable, globally recognizable, and so on. So this accreditation gives us a backup to go global. So in that context, NAAC has been emphasizing on quality education in higher educational institutions. And it is based on the mutual involvement of NAAC as well as the institution which goes for audit. Now, the institution which would like to step upon quality and would like to be recognized at the national level and at the international level definitely would approach to NAAC for being assessed and accredited. And the process of accreditation actually involves a self-study by the institution, and on the submission of the self-study report of the institution and the visit of the external peer team constituted by NAAC completes the assessment and accreditation process. NAAC has actually suggested institutions to establish internal quality assurance cells as the internal agency for quality assurance. So internal quality assurance cell is a mandatory body that has to be established in every institution. Now, in the case of autonomous institution like ours and Vellalar College, we have a separate non-statutory body called Administrative and Academic and Administrative Audit Committee to look into the quality aspects of the academic and administrative audit. Whereas in the case of many institutions who have been attached to under the Paramarsh scheme, I think most of them are non-autonomous colleges, and hence the IQAC has to play a greater role in this context. Now, looking into the primary role of IQAC, it is a significant administrative body which is responsible for all the quality aspects of the educational institution. It seeks to promote and determines the quality at every level of in every activity and at every level to see that finally we end up with a quality oriented process. And the IQAC helps in reviewing the systems. Now, IQAC in general conducts periodical audit either it be in the at the department level or at the institution level generally, It keeps reviewing and provides a feedback to the departments and the institution to see the areas of improvement. And the main primary role of IQAC is the documentation process, or otherwise we call it as record keeping. The documentation process is itself a very extensive area wherein we have to learn how to document. And definitely the metrics defined by NAAC helps us in preparing the documents in an organized manner. So IQAC acts as a bridge between this between the NAAC assessment metrics and definitely the documentation process in the departments. Whereas IQAC itself should be excellent in documentation process. First and foremost is documentation in IQAC. And this I am speaking with reference to the mentee institutions. Every mentee institution must establish an IQAC which is very much functional, and it works round the clock, round the year, to see that all the activities are in place and all the action plans have been implemented, and the process goes on as it has been defined. And IQAC must enhances the quality of all the operational committees. Like, you have various committees established in your institution. For example, you have anti-ragging committee, very first and foremost, internal complaints committee, and the SC/ST OBC cell, and of course you have the other committees like research cell, and like anything, digital media committee, like that. And you have curriculum committee to look into the curriculum aspects of the institution, which takes care of the value added courses and all. Like that, you have quite many committees inside the institution, and this is much specific to the institution themselves. It differs for the autonomous colleges, wherein the UGC defines some non-statutory bodies, statutory bodies and non-statutory bodies for autonomous institutions, wherein affiliated colleges, even though you do not you need not formally have these non-statutory bodies, it is better that you establish the non-statutory bodies defined for autonomous colleges, so that the process is quite transparent and it is of quality. So IQAC plays a great role in the operational mechanisms of these committees. And then the major role of IQAC is to analyze the gaps and address the gaps. Here, by gap analysis, we mean wherein we lack the quality, wherein we have failed to take up some procedures and see whether activities and procedures are conducted in the sense in which it has to be done in the higher educational institution. So, in this context, IQAC must evolve mechanisms and procedures for ensuring timely, efficient, progressive performance of academic, administrative, and financial tasks, and see that all the activities are relevant and quality oriented. And of course, research programs, academic and research programs can be definitely defined and implemented through the IQAC procedures. And it is up to IQAC to provide equitable access to and affordability of the academic programs for various sections of the society. Of course, this may not directly be applicable to the affiliated colleges, that is non-autonomous colleges. But here in this context, the academic programs for various sections of society, you could also consider the value-added programs that you have been offering for within the institutions to have an equitable access to the various sections of the society. And of course, the crux of any institution is the educational institution is the teaching and learning process. and it is up to IQAC to optimize and to integrate the various modern methods of teaching learning to see that it takes place in the best and most effective manner. And especially currently in our pandemic situations, we have the online teaching, and it is up to IQAC to see that the online teaching takes place in the most effective manner using all the modern tools of teaching learning. And of course, sometimes it becomes necessary. The current trend is to provide an hybrid methodology of teaching learning, that is both online and offline mode, wherein we have to address the students who come in offline mode and also in the online mode. And we have to find, the IQAC has to optimize and integrate these methodologies and to provide the best solution for this context. Next is the credibility of the assessment and evaluation process that takes place within the institution. Of course, it is the evaluation process is defined by the parent university for all the mentee institutions. Still, the conduct of evaluation within the institution must be more credible as expected by the affiliating university, and that credibility is assured by the IQAC, Internal Quality Assurance Cell. And IQAC cell has to ensure the adequacy, the maintenance and proper allocation of all the support structures and services offered to the faculty and the students within the institution. And in case you are good at research, if the institution is very good at research, IQAC has to promote the research findings, and it has to establish the networking of the institution with other institutions elsewhere. Now, I am coming to the backbone of the academic audit. Now, I have been telling about the role of IQAC in academic audit. Now, actually, all the academic activities have to be well defined at the beginning of the academic year. And in the context of telling well defined, I mean the standard operating procedures followed in the institution. NAAC themselves have given a set of standard operating procedures, and those standard operating procedures refer to only the assessment, that is, what are the documents to be submitted, how they are to be submitted, and who is to authorize, who is to authenticate a particular document, and in what chronological order documents have to be presented, and in what format it has to be presented, whether it is a document format, image format, or video format, or whatever it is, in what formats it has to be presented. And the procedures for doing that is given under the standard operating procedures for NAAC. Now here, in this context, I am talking about standard operating procedures within, that is to be established within an institution. Every institution must establish standard operating procedures for their performances, for all the activities that take place within the institution. So it is up to the management of the institution to define the standard operating procedures. It can be done in the form of manuals or manuals also. And actually, these standard operating procedures are step-by-step instructions. Okay. Now you have many activities taking place within the institution, and those activities have to be performed in a methodological manner. So we have to study the activities, how they are being performed, and accordingly we have to write down a step-by-step instruction as to how it has to be done. Now the purpose of writing down the step-by-step instructions or to establish an SOP is that you ensure a hassle-free process of activities that take place within the institution. Now, in every educational institution, there are faculty coming in and those who are retiring out, those who leave the institution, and so on. Now, every time it is not necessary that we have to educate each one of them about the procedures that take place within the institution. These standard operating procedures are printed as manuals is sufficient enough for any faculty to go ahead with the activities that have been allotted to them. Whatever responsibilities a particular faculty is assigned with, they can just refer to these standard operating procedures so that they need not run from post to pillar to know what is happening within the institution or how a situation has to be managed. Like for example, suppose you are conducting a workshop or a seminar, there has to be a set of procedures, how it has to be done within that particular institution. For example, I could give a better example. Consider the mentoring system. Mentoring system within an institution. So the standard operating procedure for a mentoring system has to be clearly defined by the IQAC cell, of course, going with the management's decisions. So in a mentoring system, we have to initially tell how many students are to be assigned to a mentor, how they have to be assigned, on what basis a particular mentor is to be assigned students, how many students are to be assigned, and how to take care of these students, and how many meetings are to be organized, how many meetings, and the periodicity of the conduct of the meeting should be mentioned in the mentor manuals. And also a record of the meetings, mentor-mentee meetings has to be kept. That is the documentation. The process of documentation of the mentor-mentee meeting has to be done in a methodological manner. All these are given as a step-by-step instruction, and that's the standard operating procedure. So SOPs generally guide to help the faculty in performing a specific operations in a smooth manner. They need not request other faculty or anyone else once these procedures are available to them in hand. So they ensure a very uniform and quality output in with regard to all the activities. And moreover, at large, it reduces the miscommunication and ambiguity. It's the procedures are the same, spelled out for every faculty, wherein when we do not have standard operating procedures for any activity, what happens is one faculty asks for another faculty as to how a certain thing has to be done. For example, maintaining mark registers, and that also is different for different institutions. There could be 2 mark registers, one specific to the faculty and one specific to the department. And how these mark registers are to be written, it differs from institution to institution. So for a particular institution, there should be a procedure defining how the mark registers are to be written, how they are to be maintained, who is to sign, who is to authenticate that, and whether it has to be randomly submitted to the IQAC for audit. And all these things are given as standard operating procedures in the manual, and hence it reduces miscommunication and ambiguity. Now let us see what are the types of how to create a standard operating procedures. The key steps you have to follow to create a robust standard operating procedure document is that first thing you must know what is to be done, and the order to in the order in which it has to be done to create an SOP. It is to find which tasks, process or workflows you need an SOP for. So you have to identify all the tasks and processes and the workflows for which you need to create an SOP. For example, it might be a laboratory wherein you have to create a document for the laboratory procedure. That is, it may be an set of instructions given to the students. For example, you take a chemistry laboratory. It may be a set of instructions given to the students as to how they have to enter into the laboratory, how they have to handle the instruments, how they have to behave themselves within the laboratory, how to handle the gadgets, and what to be done in case of any mishappenings like that. There could be quite many activities associated that takes place within the laboratory, and all the activities that take place within the laboratory, in the chemistry laboratory, has to be accounted for in the SOP for the chemistry laboratory. So we have to be very much customized to do this. For that, we should be very much thorough with all the processes that take place within the laboratory. Like the chemistry laboratory, you could define it for even a sports activity within your institution. How the sports activity are to be conducted within an institution. So like this, for every component, for every committee, for every activity, like it may be even for a workshop, conference, seminar, or a group project, or a PhD student, PhD project, conduct of vivavos for the students, all those things, we can define SOPs. And the next step is you have to conduct a survey to find out the form defining what tasks are to be done on regular basis. So you will be creating SOP for all the tasks that are done regularly. Generally, we do not create SOPs for those activities which comes in temporarily, and it is not a part of the routine activity of the system. Only for those activities which are routine and that takes place throughout the year, we have to define the standard operating procedure. Now, let me talk about the various types of the standard operating procedures. The first one is the checklist or to-do list. Now, the checklist or the to-do list is one of the simplest methods of writing a standard operating procedure document. A checklist can be created on an online mode, online note-taking app. Now, you have many apps available for this, and it can be an online note-taking app, and it can be printed as a handout and handed over to the faculties. Checklists are the easiest way to create, as you can simply create a header and the process you are creating guidelines for, and add relevant checklist items that the faculty need to follow in order to complete a task. So the faculty must follow the checklist. Like, for example, conducting a practical examination within a laboratory. So the faculty must have a checklist. Initially, they have to get the answer scripts, question papers, and all the items that are required to conduct the practical examinations. Okay, so using the checklist, the faculty can smoothly and effectively complete the task. So this is one type of standard operating procedure. So depending on the type or the nature of the task, we can select whether to write the SOP as a checklist or the other types. The next type of SOPs is the bulleted list, listing out as bullets. Generally, you have to avoid writing SOPs in a paragraph or essay type format. SOPs should never be written in standard operating procedure should never be written in an essay-like manner. It has to be written, split down into points. And this bulleted list suggests that you can just write it in a sentence or two. That is wherein you have to describe certain things. So if you are creating SOP, hello, ma'am. Hello. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
No, there is a power shutdown here. That's why I am asking. Okay, I'm just switching over to my mobile. Shall I continue?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, yes, ma'am, you can continue.
Okay, the next type is a hierarchical list. The standard operating procedure can be prepared as a hierarchical list. Now, in the context where the procedures are more complex, this hierarchical lists can be prepared. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, this is the third type of SOP format. If the procedures are more complex and need additional information, you can create hierarchical checklist or bulleted list. Bulleted list here is little different from the one that is mentioned earlier. The difference between the previous bulleted list and the bulleted hierarchical list is that here we have a flow. That means if a task is to be completed, there can be many subtasks that has to be completed for the completion of that particular task. So the bulleted list will be presented in an order in which the activities are to be complete based on the order. Okay, so if you are unable to explain a task in a single step, and at the same time you don't want to make the SOP very lengthy.
Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am. Sorry for disturbing, ma'am. Ma'am, the screen you share is not visible, ma'am.
Hello?
Ma'am, the screen you share is not visible, ma'am.
Not visible?
Yes, ma'am.
No, I think I don't have power in my laptop.
Okay, ma'am.
Just a minute.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, okay, ma'am.
Is it okay now?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, there was a power shutdown suddenly, and it took some time for me to pull it out.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Can you see this SOP?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So as I was already talking, the academic audit, the backbone of academic audit, the backbone is just a minute.
Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, kindly unmute, ma'am, please. Okay, ma'am.
Is it visible? Okay.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Yes. Now, as I already told, the backbone of academic audit is to establish the standard operating procedures within a system. Once the standard operating procedures is thorough with all the faculty and the students, definitely you could perform well in an academic audit. You could do well, and the academic audit becomes a very cakewalk. Definitely, you could give the best of quality of all the activities that have been taking place within the institution. So you have to concentrate more on defining the standard operating procedures. As I already told you, here I am defining four types of standard operating procedures: the checklist, the bulleted list, the hierarchical list, and the last one is the work process flow. Where do we use the checklists? That is, when we just have activities which are not interrelated, but they have to be done. Okay. When the activities are not interrelated, or it does not have any logical flow from one activity to the other activity, we will be using checklist. So it is used for only independent activities. So, and that can be one such thing. And this will be, for example, that is the documents that have to be presented. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Generally, in any ISO organization, an organization with ISO that comes under ISO audit, you have to have files numbered. Of course, for NAAC also you need to have files to be numbered. It's only up to you to place all the files numbered from 1 to 20, but that doesn't mean you have to keep the file 1 first and then the next file. You can just bring all the files together and then you can arrange it in the order 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, whatever is present in file number 1 need not have any bearing on file number 2. So when you do not have any follow up from one to the next, you can use the checklist type of SOP. The next type is a bulleted list. Herein, when you have to explain something briefly, instead of just mentioning it in a few 1 or 2 words, when you have to explain something, this type of SOPs could be created. And the next is the hierarchical list. As I already told you, maybe I was not audible at that time. I'm just repeating it again. When the procedures are more complex and you need additional information, you can create hierarchical checklist or bulleted list. Now, the difference between the bulleted list I mentioned earlier and the bulleted list I mentioned here is that the items in the bulleted list, the first item in the bulleted list has to be completed before starting with the second item in the bulleted list. So there is a logical follow-up in the hierarchical list wherein you have some bulleted items. And it is also used in a context where you are unable to explain a task in a single step. At the same time, you don't want to make the SOP very lengthy. Adding hierarchical steps, that could be very much beneficial. Okay. Now, for example, if your SOPs in step 1 tells a faculty to create a new account, then step 1 can say that enter your username, while the step 2 can tell input your password. So definitely without entering your username, you don't go to the next step, that is input of password, and after that you have the CAPTCHA, entering the CAPTCHA, and in case sometimes you may have some other credential verifications also in an hierarchical manner, wherein the first one has to be done, then only the next one can be proceeded. So that's about the hierarchical methodology of preparing a standard operating procedure. The next one is the process flowchart. The standard operating procedure expressed in the form of a process flowcharts. Now, these flowcharts are a wonderful way to represent how a process works visually. Okay, when you want to visually represent certain things, you can use the process flowchart. It helps to give you better context around the workflow. For example, suppose you want to have a sketch of the water liquid waste management within the campus. So you have to prepare a flowchart how the liquid waste from every block is transported through within the campus and how it is taken out of the campus. In such cases, you could prepare a process flowchart, which again is a standard operating procedure. So you will have many checkpoints in that process flowchart, wherein you have to state it with some images, and it definitely helps you to regulate the workflow of the activities that are represented with the process flow chart. And then it also shows how one step is related to another, and it definitely helps the faculties to conceptualize the complete concept in an image format, and it gives a better understanding of the activities to be completed. Now coming to the structural, what are the basic elements when you are defining a standard operating procedure? Now, what I am defining here does not mean the checklist or the bulleted list. This generally comes under the hierarchical, when you are preparing a hierarchical standard operating procedure. These are the elements that are commonly found in the most of the standard operating procedures. The title page. The title page, the unique SOP identification number, date on which the standard operating procedure is created, the department for which it has been, department or committee, whatever it is, department or committee, or if it is institution, it's institution. So you have to specify all those things in the title. And finally, the name and signature of the parties involved in creating the SOP documents, that can be given under approval signatures at the end. So title page consists of the title of the procedure, the unique identification. For each SOP, you give a document number, SOP 1, or if it is department level, you can give it as D1. Mention the document. For example, if it is a chemistry department, you can give it as some C, just like how you give a code for the question papers and answer scripts and so on, like that. And the next is the table of contents for the SOP. What are the contents that are presented within the SOP? A table of contents will help you to summarize the document structure, and it acts as a guide for the reader to quickly jump to the relevant, whichever section they require. It will enable the reader or the faculty to jump to the sections of the that are relevant to them. They are particularly helpful if the document is large in size. That is, when the SOP consists of quite many pages. In that case, so whatever we wish to refer, that alone can be done using the table of contents. And the purpose. Next is, you have to state the purpose of establishing a standard operating procedure. The simplest example that we could understand is the laboratory manual. The laboratory manual is written to ensure the safety and regulatory measures within a lab. So here the purpose, you have to describe the goals and objectives of creating the document and how it will benefit the user and the organization. The next is the scope. Now scope describes the limitations of the document. Okay, like for example, if I am writing an SOP, the scope is only my institution, because the activities are confined and defined by the management and the institution. So the scope of the document is only within the institution. Sometimes the scope can be only department level scope. It is defined at the department level. What applies to one department may not be applicable to other department. So scope defines the limitations of the document and helps the faculty to understand the boundaries of the standard operating procedure. It clearly states what the document is about and what it accomplishes. And the next one is glossary. Glossary is definitely optional. That is, when we have quite many terms, many new terms, we can have this glossary. As you all know what is glossary, all of you must be familiar with that. So I'm just skipping that. And the next is the roles and responsibilities. This is very important. Roles and responsibilities is very much important, because in this part only we define the crux of the standard operating procedure. Suppose a particular, for example, you take a principal. A principal has roles and responsibilities. A teacher, a faculty has roles and responsibility. For example, a faculty's role is to take care of the teaching learning process. Of course, apart from that, the teacher has to be a very good mentor to the student, and the teacher has to be a good networking person, a team player, and those roles and responsibilities of the teacher will be described under this roles and responsibilities. And the procedures herein you state in what methodology that activity has to be done, and the related documents. And in related documents, you can specify what are the documents that are related to this a particular activity for which this standard operating procedure is established. And the next is revision history. By revision history, we mean how often you revise the standard operating procedure. Once you establish a standard operating procedure, it is not permanent. It has to be refined. It has to be revamped depending upon the modification in the activities or the new activities that have been developed. So the revision has to be stated within the documents. So what is a version? It can also be a version of the standard operating procedures. And finally, it is the approval signatures. Once the revision has been done, initially it is once the SOP has been established, who has defined the standard operating procedure and who is authenticating it. And normally the IQAC in any institution, the SOPs are established by the committees themselves, the conveners of the committees, and they are authenticated by the IQAC team, and finally authenticated by the principal, and they are submitted to the college management, wherein it is passed in the council of the institution, and it is placed for approval signatures. And that's all about the standard operating procedure. So as I told you already, this standard operating procedure forms the backbone of an academic audit. And once SOPs are in line and the process is all the activities and the process within the institution is very smooth in the institution, and definitely you can assure quality and excellence in your academic audit. Your academic audit will give an excellent audit report when you follow the standard operating procedures. Of course, there are some human interventions and human touch in the completion of the academic audit, and that's other part, how to manage the human resources. And that's not necessary here. I'm just talking about the documentation behind the academic audit. Once the documentation is done as per the procedure, and you can definitely ensure quality and excellence in your academic audit. And that's all that I would like to share with you, and I hope I have reached out to you in explaining myself regarding this academic audit. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I call upon Dr. K.K. Maitri, Associate Professor and Head, Department of Mathematics CA, to propose vote of thanks.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. It's my immense pleasure to propose vote of thanks on behalf of IQAC, Vellore College for Women. First, I would like to thank our management and Madam Principal to render their untiring support in all our endeavors. Our heartfelt gratitude goes to Dr. N. Rajeshwari, Principal, Sri GVG Vishology College for Women, Udumalpet, for her valuable guidance and speech. I take this opportunity to thank our IQAC Coordinator, Dr. L.M. Swarnalata, Head, PG and Research Department of English, Vellore College for Women, for her endless support, and the members of IQAC team. I also thank the faculty members of various mentee institutions and our institution for their constant support. Thank you one and all. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, dear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
The participants are asked to fill the feedback form posted in the chat box.
Now, I would like to know how many participants from mentee institutions, madam?
Ma'am, it's around 25, ma'am.
Okay. Now, I would like to get a feedback from them.
Yes, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. We will share you, ma'am.
Like not exactly feedback, or they would like to have a discussion or something, we can have.
Okay, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. We will share.
Madam Raji, madam, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Swarnalatha. I don't know how relevant it was and what given to them. I thought this is a starting point before going for SSR. These SOPs have to be completed in all institutions. I would like to get.
College, they have submitted SSR and they are going to have the visit on October 20th and 21st.
My best wishes to them. My best wishes to them. Let them get the best ever grade possible for whatever they have done. My heartfelt wishes to them.
Okay, madam. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, madam. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Shall we leave?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Shall I leave the meeting, ma'am?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, madam. Thank you. Yes, you can leave the meeting, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so
so
kind
much.
of you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.